Hello and welcome to Creating Animations for Anatomy Part 1. In this series, we will be going over the basics of how to create animations for your cell physiology project. In order to begin, you will need a few important tools. All of the tools I will be featuring in this tutorial are free and open source. You are welcome to use other tools if you have them available to you, but these will get the job done and are free. The three tools that I will be using are Audacity for sound recording and editing, Inkscape for drawing, Pencil for the actual animation. There are a couple of other drawing programs that are nice, notably MyPaint and GIMP. Both of these are free, but I prefer to use Inkscape for a couple of reasons that I will show you as we move on in the tutorial. Let's begin by launching Inkscape. This is Inkscape. There's a number of tools here which we'll get into as we continue the tutorial. For now, let's select the Circle tool. While using the Circle tool, I can hold down Control to make a perfect circle. This circle will become the hydrophilic head of my phospholipid. Now I need some hydrophobic tails. For that, I'm going to use the Bezier curve tool. This tool is a bit tricky. By clicking and dragging, you can make handles which guide the shape of the curve. If you click without dragging, you will make sharp points. It's a really neat tool, but it takes some getting used to, so play around with it. Oops, looks like I made that one a little too long. It's okay though, I will just switch to the selection tool and resize it. By clicking on the shape, I can switch to rotate mode and make a minor adjustment. Those lipid tails are way too thin. We can change that. Under the object menu, choose Fill and Stroke. That will bring up the Fill and Stroke window. I will change the width to 10 and select the rounded end caps for both the lipid tails. Now that looks pretty good, but whoever heard of a gray lipid? Everybody knows that lipids are blue. So let's change the colors of our lipid. First, select the circle and switch to the Fill tab on the Fill and Stroke window. Next, play around with the color sliders until you get a color you're happy with. After that, switch to the Stroke Paint tab to change the color of the outline. Finally, select both lipid tails and change their color as well. There, our lipid looks pretty good, but we should still group it together as a single object. To do that, select the Object menu and then the Group function. Now let's take a look at one of the reasons I use Inkscape rather than one of the other drawing programs. Inkscape is a vector-based drawing program. That means that all of the shapes are stored in the computer as mathematical equations. This can be important if you want to change the size of an image. As you can see, I can zoom in on my phospholipid as much as I want and the picture stays smooth. This is because the computer just scales the picture based on the mathematical equations. In a regular drawing program, all the shapes are just stored as pixels, so if you zoom in, the picture gets blocky. One phospholipid isn't very exciting, so let's work on making this a whole bilayer. First, I will zoom out so I can get a larger picture, then I'll select my phospholipid and copy it. Next, I can paste it and place it next to the one that's already there. I'm going to repeat this several times in order to make a whole row of phospholipids. Then I will copy the row, rotate it around, and place it beneath the existing row. Now we have a phospholipid bilayer. I will extend it by selecting the whole thing, zooming out, and pasting a copy of it right next to the one that's there. A phospholipid bilayer by itself is neat, but doesn't really do anything. So let's add a protein so we can have something to animate. In order to add the protein, I'm going to use the Bezier curve tool again. I'll select the tool and begin to draw a closed shape. Remember, with this tool, a click drag creates a handle which controls the curvature of the line, whereas a single click will create a sharp corner. Close the shape by clicking on the square found at the beginning of the shape. For this shape, I will set the stroke to 8 and use red as a fill color. Because I want to make this protein a channel, I will make a similar shape next to the first one, again using the Bezier curve tool. Once the shape is finished, I will again select a stroke of 8 and red for the fill color. I will finish the image by selecting a number of the phospholipids and copying them to the other side of the protein, effectively making it appear as if the protein is embedded within the membrane. Now that I'm happy with the image, it's time to get ready to export it into Pencil. Under the File menu, select Export Bitmap. A menu will pop up. There are a lot of things in the menu here, but the only one we really care about is file name. Select Browse and choose a file name and a location where you'll be able to find it. It's also important to remember to save it as a PNG file, because the PNG file format preserves any transparency that may exist in your image. After you've selected an appropriate file name, click Save and then click Export. Once the file is finished exporting, you can close the Export Bitmap window. That's all for this video. I hope you found it helpful, and be sure to come back in part 2 to learn how to animate your image.